Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Hey guys, I am super excited to welcome my next guest to the Legacy Builders podcast. MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University's head coach for the men's tennis team, Mr. Jimmy Borendame. Jimmy's been the head coach at MTSU since 2010 and has just raked in tons of accolades. He is, I guess, this year going for the 5-peat in the conference championship, or 6-peat.
6-peat.
Six-peat.
Yes,
so you've completed the 5-peat.
Completed the 5-peat.
So
yes,
he
sir.
has won the last 5 conference championships with his team over at MTSU. I guess in the past 6 or 7 years has been named the conference coach of the year 4 different times. Has led the team to the NCAA tournament several times as well. And really is, at least in our community of Murfreesboro, is not just known for winning, but also just building great athletes and personal and player development. And so, Jimmy, super excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm excited to talk with you.
So this episode, we're going to we're going to go from start to finish, but who knows what all we'll get into.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like in college sports these days, there's just tons of things we could talk about, but really want to get to know you and kind of your story, you know, how you got into tennis and then, you know, what got you to MTSU and really how you approach, you know, you don't just by happenstance, you know, win 5 straight conference championships and become coach of the year, Conference USA. Those are things that take work and time and effort. And so to really love to kind of even dive into that. We have a lot of folks that listen to the podcast that are business leaders, that are leaders in the community, leaders, you know, in their churches or nonprofits, and just kind of the whole gamut. And so would really love to kind of get into, you know, how you manage that. And I know you've got a lot of international players too, and how you kind of mesh all those different personalities and backgrounds. I think it's just super fascinating. Obviously, that was why our mutual friend Ross was like, you got to get Jimmy on the podcast. So
that's a lot of topics. How much time do we have, Matt?
we're going to cover it all.
All right.
But as we do with every guest, I'm going to kind of just ask you, when you think of the word legacy, what does it mean to you, and how has it shaped how you approach your life and work?
Whew, okay. You know,
Real easy one.
Yeah, real easy. Legacy, you know, I guess for me, when I think of the word legacy, I think of how individuals or groups, you know, impact the world in a positive way that affect change, you know, and it has a lasting impact that, you know, has changed your community, you know, and you know, it's funny. I've thought a little bit about this, you know, once you asked me, and I haven't really spent much time thinking about my legacy at all. You know, I talk to a lot of other people about it. I talk to my student athletes about it. You know, I talk to my former players about it. I talk to business leaders about it. But how it's shaped me in my work moving forward, you know, I guess I've just always wanted to be a very reputable individual in our community that has been a positive influence for our whole tennis community. Someone with high standards, and you know, that I spread that on to my student athletes, and you know, just be a well-respected community leader is kind of how I see it for my vision for my legacy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
When you talk to your student athletes about legacy, what is it you're talking to them about it? Is it because obviously I think for you with your reputation, you're talking about things beyond the tennis court. So when you're talking to them about that, what are some of the things you're talking to them about?
Yeah, obviously these guys that they have a finite time of 4 years. Obviously, with COVID, 5 years. That's a whole other topic. But and then how they're remembered. They set an example for future tennis players, for the younger generation of guys that we have, and opportunities to be leaders within the team. But I really look at it as how you represent Middle Tennessee, you represent your family. As you mentioned, international students, we have guys that represent their country, and how they conduct themselves on and off the court. It stays with you. Whether it's good or bad. Dr. McPhee always makes this comment to us coaches about how, in the newspaper, there isn't a section for research and academic rankings. There's a sports section.
Yeah.
And we want that sports section to be, all positive about men's tennis and all our sports at MTSU. But, that, one incident, on court or off court can really impact that legacy in a positive way. And so I always talk about not taking a risk with your reputation. Never take a risk with your reputation. And obviously the reputation kind of goes hand in hand with a legacy, whether it's positive or whether it's negative.
Yeah. So you've mentioned community a few times. How do you? Because obviously you do have a lot of players that they didn't grow up in Murfreesboro. It's probably culture shock for some of them coming to the South.
Yeah.
But how do you? What are some things, kind of practical things that you do? I know the answer to this, but share with our listeners some of the things that you do with your student athletes to instill the importance of community and giving back to your community and be involved in your community.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a multifaceted kind of a plan of attack. It's not just one thing. I think it first of all, it starts, we actually start the season off every year. We start the new school year off with a very, very cool event called the MTSU Pro-Am. And it's a really cool event which intermingles the tennis community with our tennis players. And it was started by Coach Dale Short. It's in the 37th, this fall will be the 37th annual. It's been going on. And local community people get to play tennis doubles, men with the men's players and women's, and alumni come back into town, and we have a fun event, and we play against each other for prizes and have a big cookout and dinner.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, it couldn't be more perfect. And Coach Short deserves all the honor for getting this thing started and making this thing, happen for so many years, and the tradition and all the former players that come back from all over the world to participate back in this event. And right away, here, a young man from wherever, any country, any part of the U.S., gets paired with a local individual who I purposely try to pair them so there's maybe some matching, some similarities, maybe interested in real estate, maybe interested in this, or maybe even speaks that language or has been to that country or whatever it may be. And it bridges them instantly. And then all of a sudden that community member is like, hey, I'm going to go watch Johnny. I got to play doubles with Johnny, and this kid was awesome.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, right there, instant connection with our community.
I love that.
And that's just the start of the season, and it just kind of kicks everything off. And then, like as we say, I'm Italian, so we say we break bread together, and we have meals, and they get to spend some time with them. And but then it goes on and on. I mean, we do a huge event with Murfreesboro City Schools every semester. We average 150 to 200 kids that come out to the courts. And we do a free tennis clinic at our brand new courts on campus. And, it's wild. I mean, 200 kids, if you can imagine, like it's like
Organized chaos, right?
yeah, it's herding cats, you know. But Lisa Trail and Murfreesboro City Schools and Dr. Trey Duke, they partnered with us, which was really cool because that kind of started a lot of other different partnerships with the Murfreesboro
Yeah.
City Schools. And then these kids, obviously, some of the times it's their first experience with tennis, but we get to share that passion with them.
Yeah.
And it's just been awesome to see. And then that's kind of spiraled into, we have a ball kid program, we have an after school program, we have my wife's a school PE teacher over at Hobgood, and we do a PE takeover program where I bring the kids into the student athletes into the schools, and we bring nets, and the PE teacher gets to take a break for the day, and me and the student athletes teach the tennis class. And
That's great.
so it's just kind of nonstop. I mean, which is great, and I just think that, you know, men's tennis in the grand scheme of things, it's, you know, it's a non-revenue sport, but how can we really have an impact in our community and make ourselves relevant, and
Yeah.
at the same time, you know, tennis is a sport for a lifetime, and if we can hook a couple kids that were never played it,
Yeah.
I mean, that gets me real fired up.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, those are just some of the ways. I could keep going on and on, but you said we have a time limit. So.
I love that's all great stuff, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that is almost kind of a theme and somewhat of a core value of mine is just involvement in the community and is service, and
Yeah.
so I think a common theme with a lot of our guests has been they have a passion for their community and giving back and being involved, and so definitely wanted to take some time to talk through some of those things. So let's talk about your path to coaching. And just, you know, where it began. Was there this defining moment? I'm assuming maybe talk a little bit about childhood, and you know,
Oof.
was tennis like your was it all about tennis, or you know, you and I, when we met recently, we talked about this book called Range, and I was kind of sharing with you a little bit about how, you know, some of these so often parents, and I am one. I've got three. You know, you're a parent as well. And you know, so often we want our kids to be these prodigies, right? You know, the next Rafael Nadal or the next Tiger
Yeah.
Woods or, you know, Albert Pujols. You name the sport, you name the
Of course.
pro athlete. But the interesting thing about this book was it turned into more of a professional book, but it talked about how so often kids, and I asked you this question, let's talk about a little bit of it here before you go into it, but so often the kids that have played multiple sports for
Yeah.
a long period of time, you know, 3 or 4 different sports, often end up being much better athletes once they get into maybe high school and they say, okay, I'm going to focus on maybe just this sport or these 2 sports
Yeah.
and really try to hone in my skills. Well, if they've, you know, oftentimes once they get to you, or if you're recruiting them and they've played a lot of sports, I mean,
Yeah.
have you found that, you know, the more well-rounded kids are they more well-rounded or?
Yeah, you know, as a parent and as a coach, you know, I'm always encouraging, you know, other sports, and not just kind of specializing. You know, I think at some point when the kid and the student wants to specialize, you know, then that's kind of a big moment.
Yeah.
And I have that book on my list to check out, but I haven't gotten there yet. But you know, you know, I remember when I decided to specialize, like, and just, you know, this is my game. Like,
Yeah.
this is me.
When was that?
You know, so I dabbled a little bit in tennis, when I was about 8 years old. And then kind of gravitated away, huge baseball fan, played soccer, karate, did it, you know, a bunch of things. But, the defining moment for me when I was 10 years old and sister came home and she was 9 and my sister Taryn told me she found the sport that she was better than me in. And that was, I remember being at the kitchen table and just looking at her, and she's thinking she's better than me at something, and she's younger. And I was like, I'm going tomorrow. We're coming. And and so that's the story. And then it became, mom dropped me off at this place, and it was like $10 for the whole day. And she'd pick me up when it was dark. I brought a little cooler out there, and I was gonna be there the whole day.
Yeah.
And so that's the story about how little Jimmy got into it. And shortly after that, it was just like, man, I'm playing tournaments, and it just, I wanted it more and more and more. And the passion that I found in tennis for me was that, I'm a little bit of a self starter, kind of do all my own. Is if I lost, I made all the mistakes. I carry that L. If I win, all right, then that's up to me. If I want to work more, I can work more. I can work more
Yeah.
by myself. I can go serve, whatever, all those different things. And there was no like when my son comes home and it's like, the third baseman was terrible. He kept dropping the ball. I'm like, hey, we can talk about tennis, and just be on you. But we don't, and it's just a little bit different. I don't want to say I'm not a team player, because, that may come off like I'm, just all about me. But obviously, as a coach, I'm about the team, but growing up, that was kind of the starter to get into the sport of tennis for me.
So, play college tennis?
Oh yeah, I didn't elaborate at all. So I grew up in Chicago. I'm a suburb of Chicago kid. I grew up, started playing, became the #1 player in Chicago, then kind of elevated, got in the top 5 or so of Illinois, decided to go play college tennis at Butler University,
Yeah.
a little private school in Indianapolis. Half the time I have to explain about where it is and blah, blah, blah. But basketball team kind of
Yeah, they're
helped
usually
us
pretty
get
good,
that
yeah.
going, and played college tennis there, got done, graduated with honors in finance. Thought I was going to go try to do all this stuff and make money and investments and blah, blah, blah. At the last minute, I got a chance to go do a graduate assistant job, a coaching job at West Virginia University, where I could be the men's tennis assistant coach and get a master's in sport management.
Okay.
So this story kind of goes as well. So it's a 1-year degree. I get it. All right, I got to dabble in both. But to finish the degree, you have to do a internship with a working internship. So I get this internship with the Chicago Bulls. Now, don't get too excited just yet, because this is the baby Bulls. This is like post Jordan. Pippen's coming back for his last hurrah. Bill Cartwright's the coach. The team is terrible. And I'm selling executive suites, which is like the skyboxes. But nobody wants to be even around the Bulls anymore, because they're losing and the dynasty is gone. And blah, blah. But I was miserable, and this kind of goes into why I got into coaching. And but I was hiding in the bathroom at work because I didn't want to go back into the office, and I was waiting till it was 4 o'clock or whatever it was to then go home and then go play, go coach, whatever. And so it was a defining moment when my father pulled me aside and was like, you're not doing something that you love.
Yeah.
That's not right what you're doing. You're supposed to be working, and you're trying to catch the first train back home as fast as you can to get out of there. And you're not putting your heart and soul into this.
Yeah.
So you need to do something else. And there were a couple more defining moments like that, and I realized I was miserable. And so I applied for some assistant coaching jobs, went to college, William and Mary, and hence the coaching life began. And I realized from my father that you need to do something that you're passionate about and love, and you won't work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And now I kind of went through the assistant circle, Virginia Tech assistant for 5 years, met my wife, Genevieve, and then went to Drake as a head coach for a year. And then we thought we'd be in Murfreesboro for 2 or 3 years, and 15 years later, and 2 kids, and we're in Murfreesboro, and we love this place. So long story.
No,
Sorry.
I love
I
it.
hope I
That's
didn't.
great. I think that's all important. And so, what drew you to Murfreesboro? It's interesting. You made the comment you thought you'd be here 2 years. Of course, there's probably a lot of us that have similar stories. But what was it about MTSU?
So I was competing constantly against Middle Tennessee as an assistant at Virginia Tech. We would play Middle Tennessee all the time. Every year we'd play. And so I got to know Coach Dale Short a little bit. I saw the strong teams that he had, the history, the tradition of excellence that he had. I actually interviewed for the job in 2007. And I love to kind of poke Chris Massaro a lot because he didn't hire me in 2007. But lo and behold, in 2010, the job opened again, and they called me right away. We were in Des Moines, Iowa, and my wife is from Mississippi, and she hated it. It snowed like October 1st, and was like, "We're out of here." I remember she told me to take the job, no matter how much the pay. Well, I was like, I don't know about that, but I knew there were good bones there because Dale had done so well.
Yeah.
There were some big red flags, though, because there was no indoor courts in Murfreesboro. Outdoor courts were kind of old and things like that. But, I just felt like there were good bones, and athletics department was supportive. I knew there was a good tennis community that I could rally. It was a lot warmer than Des Moines, so
So it checked all the boxes.
yeah, and happy. What do they say? Happy wife, happy life. So I'm like, all right, let's go and see how this works. So yeah, and it's just I love building and kind of I kind of think of myself as an architect and constantly trying to add to the program and build and build and build. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of like where I'm here, and so I'm just still trying to keep building.
Are there coaches that you either sat under as an assistant or throughout, coaches that you had throughout your playing time that you would see as mentors, or that you maybe have modeled your kind of coaching philosophy behind?
Yeah. Oh, there's been a bunch. I actually was super fortunate growing up as a youngster. That my high school coach was a man named Bob Hoppenstead, and he was the motivational speaker for the Chicago Bears. And if you don't know that in 1986, this is our last Super Bowl championship, Jim McMahon and crew, and this man is all about the positive mindset. And actually, his license plate was POSMIN, and I'll never forget this because he was just an influence on me like no other, and just always found a way to look at everything half glass full instead of half glass empty, and find momentum in lots of little positive wins. And he was one. My coach at Butler was another one, just so enthusiastic about college athletics. I've been really lucky throughout my time. I mean, I could go on and on about the different coaches that I've worked with and under, for, side by side. Kermit Davis was a huge advocate for me here when I became the coach at Middle Tennessee. Whit Turnbow, men's golf here in Murfreesboro, so influential for me. Rick Insel, our women's basketball coach, currently. Like coaching's all about sharing ideas, and very few people actually have like original things, but I love to pick brains for other coaches and spend time. It doesn't even matter the sport, because we're all fighting the same fight.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
So how have you kind of passed on, from your earliest coach that you mentioned to some of the other guys you've sat under and worked with? How have you passed on those lessons to your players?
Oof.
Or how has that kind of influenced your own kind of philosophy as a coach?
Yeah, you pick up these tidbits constantly, and I look at my every year, kind of almost like I do believe I'm a teacher. I mean, people are like, oh, you're a coach, or I always get a lot of people that'll come up to me and they think I teach PE classes, to the students at MTSU, and I'm like, I don't. But I look at it like a school teacher, and every year I'm trying to add to my curriculum. I'm trying to morph, what I'm doing. Maybe I need, and if you're not changing with the times and the students and the student athletes and all these different things, and so I could go on and on about the different things that I've taken from this coach that have made part of my program. My core values for my team are respect, integrity, and hard work, and those are my pillars. And I think those, one can come from, I could go on which one kind of came from each one, but that's taken some time to really for me to understand the value of culture. A lot of coaches really just focus in on recruiting, the best student athlete they can possibly get. Like something I took from Kermit, which I think is a key piece is, Kermit for the longest time, was people don't realize that Kermit was struggling for a while, and then he figured things out.
Right.
And I love to talk to him about that. Is he figured out that he needed to find kids that matched his personality, his program.
Yeah.
And so I really kind of dove into the fact that, what kind of kid, does well with me and at Middle Tennessee and in Murfreesboro.
Right.
And we alluded a little bit before, like how difficult it's getting. But, that culture is so much more important than, X's and O's and having great athletes because, kind of pulling the maximum out of each kid is I think what I'm trying to do on a daily basis. I'm racking my brain like, how do I get a little bit more out of Matt,
Yeah.
or how do I make him feel a little bit better? So I don't know if I really answered your question about like each specific thing. I guess I just talked a little bit more about just over in general my philosophy of being culture strong.
Yeah. Well, I think
Instead
it's
of
that, building and sustaining a championship culture, which you have obviously done. So, how do you sustain that, I guess? And is it just, and I'm not meaning in the sense of like, can you get the 6 feet
Yeah.
but how do you sustain the culture itself, which has obviously, been part of your success,
Yeah.
right?
One thing that I'm constantly doing and is, looking at my team as it's almost like a farm team. So, you're my seniors and my juniors, those guys are my leaders, right? But I've also got to have kind of one, up and coming, almost like, all right,
Yeah.
that's my major league team. And in my sophomores, my freshmen, I've got to start to identify and cultivate them as, all right, this guy's going to be the guy in a year or two or whatnot. And that all starts with relationships, and kind of, I actually work with a guy, you probably know Colby Jubinville,
Yeah.
here in town. And Colby, has his coaching and mentoring program here on campus. And I'll often have him meet with the team, and we'll do some assessments and try to evaluate which of these guys you think really, has some skill sets, and identifying what their skills are and their personality traits.
Yeah.
Can help me identify which ones I can kind of, potentially could bring along. And it's always interesting to see. It's not always the one that you think, it's sometimes it's this, the silent leader that's, really key. He
Yeah.
does all the right things, but, he's pretty introverted and things like that. And those can be key leaders for a team.
Right.
And it doesn't always have to be the most outspoken vocal guy. But so, to keep the championship caliber, I am constantly focusing on the leadership, maintaining the culture, and really at the end of the day, I set the standards for the culture based on what's acceptable and not acceptable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my vision is that if the team is led by only me, they'll be good, but I want them to be great. So player-led teams have really been what's taken the team to the next level. And so that's why I really focus on that individual leadership and which guys. It's been pretty interesting. I started working with Dow Smith out of Smyrna, and he has the I'm blanking out on he built a work group. It's they meet once a month. It's I'm slipping right now. Irresistible Workplace Initiative. Oh, all right, Trent with the huge save.
That's right.
And
That's why we
so
have him here.
I've started. I've started to be part of that program, and it's really interesting to see like how, you know, these different business leaders are looking to try to motivate and make their employees, you know, feel value and want to be, you know, essential part of the development of the business. And it's so intriguing for me to hear like how the things that I'm doing with my tennis team, 18 to 22-year-olds and little old men's tennis at MTSU, and I'm sitting with these major players in business in this area, and we're talking about literally the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's really enjoyable to know that my problems and their problems and things that we're trying to, you know, cultivate within their business are the same things that I'm trying to do within my little men's tennis team.
That's cool.
So yeah.
So how do you maintain kind of keeping the team hungry and motivated? I mean, obviously, you know, and I guess I'm asking this in more of a practical sense, but you know, you've won all these conference championships. So as you go into the next year, what's the bar, so to speak? Are you changing the bar? Are you giving them specific metrics, or, you know, what does that look like, you know, from just because I think it's so easy, you know, this is a real practical sense of, we had to teach our 7-8-year-old baseball team on Saturday. They get out to the 8-0 lead in their baseball game on Saturday, and they lose 11-8.
Ooh.
And that was the first 2 or 3 innings. You know, they were. Your buddy Mark McIntyre's son was on the other team, and we met in the bathroom, and he's like, "Well, we may be getting our time back today. It's going to be a short one." And literally the next inning, they just went on a run. His kids team, and so but you know, but after the game, it was trying to teach these 7 and 8-year-olds like, hey, you guys got complacent, like, and trying to help them understand what that means, and you guys kind of got comfortable. So in your sense, as you've won all these conference championships, and obviously some of those players are likely still around who have won those. So when you head into the next year, what are you doing to motivate those guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, so motivating 18 to 22-year-olds is a challenge, just period. And you know, I always joke. I was actually joking this morning with a neighbor, you know, and he was talking, and I said, you know, sometimes I wish I had a normal job, you know, like I worked like 9 to 5 or in business or something like that. And he said, you know, so a lot of us business guys probably wish we could be you know, and I'm like, well, you know, your job depends on 18 to 22-year-olds, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in their lives that they think is. But to your question, like, so each year, I never set the team goals, but we always there's always I always prefer 3 to 5 process goals, and then 1 result goal. You know, we've been very fortunate that we have over time, the result goal has been more of a national championship like caliber goal. And so Middle Tennessee men's tennis has never made the round of 16 in the NCAA tournament, Sweet 16, since we're talking about basketball earlier. We've lost in the round of 32 3 years in a row. And, you know, Coach Dale made it twice as well. And for whatever reason, MTSU, we've just kind of gotten to that point. And obviously that's kind of making history, you know, and that's, we talk about legacy, but, you know, so the players, obviously know about this result oriented goal, but
Yeah.
That just kind of the end of the season, but really focusing on the process goals of have growth. I'm always loving to read about the growth mindset and how every opportunity or every setback is a chance to learn and get a little bit better. The boys make fun of me because I always say we win or we learn, and but it's true.
Yeah.
Like every setback that I've ever had has been a chance for me to reflect on how I'm doing as a person, or how I'm speaking with different individuals, or how, like, when I came to Murfreesboro, I thought I was one coach, and over the years I've just continued to morph myself into what is needed to be done to be successful, and so I'm constantly telling the guys that you have to strive to be uncomfortable, and when if you're super comfortable all the time on the court, how much are you really growing? And they look at me sometimes like, what the heck is this bald guy saying? Like, he doesn't know nothing. But I'm trying to constantly put them in situations where yeah, that they are uncomfortable, so that they keep looking, and I keep challenging them constantly. Um, Another aspect I think is really important is I'm if I'm getting into the weeds of things a little bit, but I am constantly building a schedule of competition that is non-comparable to the other MTSU tennis programs, athletic department wise. I mean, I think this year we played 12 Power Four teams. Because I found that the players don't get excited when we play against a university that's maybe doesn't have that name brand recognition.
Sure.
They get excited, and our community gets excited to show out when University of Tennessee comes to town. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, each year I have to find different things. What's going to kind of push this team
Yeah.
to constantly be on their toes. Can't pull the old methods that my coach Gene Holland used to make, and literally put thumbtacks in the bottom of our shoes one time because he wanted to keep us on our toes. Literally, probably can't do that these days, but he did.
Oh, that's funny.
But
So I love what you talk about as your core values as a team,
yeah,
as a coach, of respect, integrity, and hard work.
mm-hmm.
What's the purpose behind that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that all of everything that I'm constantly doing revolves around those things. I have a friend, John Hinkle. He constantly calls me the hardest working coach in America, and I need the players to know that I am a leader that will do all things. I actually had to take all these things down off my social media because I used to, post myself blowing the leaves off the courts and fixing the zip ties, and and doing all these little jobs that were that I was doing because I just, it has to be done, and if it's not getting done, I'm going to do it, and I need them to see that those core values are what makes our culture. And if we don't respect each other, we don't respect our coaches, our teammates, our staff, all the things that we have, and we don't take care of them, it's the core foundation of who I am. And that's why, it's been the core foundation for the team. The integrity part of you're only as good as your word.
Yeah.
If I shake your hand and I told you I was going to be here today for the podcast, I'm here. I did show up. I did have to we did cancel one Friar Crawford. That was on me. So, but I followed through, and
Yeah.
Can't just talk the talk. We got to walk the walk. And there's a lot of youth these days that just they'll say a lot of things. They're going to do a lot of things. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, but you gotta carry the torch. You got to do it what you say. Walk. What's the famous quote? Was it FDR? Walk softly, but carry a big stick.
Mm-hmm.
And so at my greater purpose is to make these young men men.
Yeah.
And when they leave the program, they happen to just become better tennis players. But really, I want their fathers to be and their mothers to be like, all right, they went to Jimmy, they got a degree, became a better tennis player, but more importantly, he's a man. And he's going to be able to take care of himself, and he's going to be able to show up for a job interview, do all the right things, conduct himself really well. And maybe, in 10 years, they're going to call me up and say, hey, you know what? All those times you busted my butt for being late and doing this and blah, blah, blah. And so, I think all those core values for me are kind of dive into what my main purpose, and my purpose is to make them high quality, high character, reputable men, that go out into the community and do good.
Yeah.
And so, did I cover all three?
Well,
Integrity?
and I
did.
think what those three core values do is, and I mean, obviously you can speak to this better than me, but outside looking in is, one, they're building your culture that you've talked about. And then two, they're preparing these student athletes to acclimate into a different culture, which is the working culture. And if they're and quite honestly, if they know how to, if they take those on as their core values as they enter the workforce, I think they're going to be 10 times more prepared than other kids or students who haven't been taught those things. And so, kudos to you for taking those on and really trying to instill them in these men, so that they do become, working productive.
I appreciate that. It's actually interesting. I've got a couple alum that will literally, they're in the working world and business world, and they will call me and ask me, hey, I want one of your guys. You got anybody studying finance, or you got anybody in marketing or whatever? Because student athletes, and not that I'm trying to toot my own horn or my guys' horns only, but they have a lot of the things, the characteristics, the hardworking mentality, I find this a lot, I talked about, maybe I want to do a 9 to 5, but, I don't look at my job as there's, finite time. I mean, I worked yesterday from 9:30 to 8 o'clock at night, on Sunday. We don't, a lot of student athletes don't look at it like, oh, there's a clock. All right, I'm going to work within these hours. We're going to get the job done. And so they're extremely marketable going into the real world. So if you're hiring,
Jimmy might have a student athlete for you that'll make a great career partner there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, one of the things that I never took high stock in early on in my career was the value of a mentor. And I think, we talked about my friend and mentor, whose son you coach, Mr. Shane Reeves.
Yeah.
But I mean, the relationship that I've had with him over the past 5-6 years is just invaluable. And so, I think that's another thing, just with those core values lead to so much more. And I think, the amount of student athletes that you've probably had come back and mentor other players on your team, and leaders in the community that have played in the pro-am and that, wanted to latch on to that player and say, I want to hang out with this kid.
Yeah.
And they're invested at that point, and I think, there's so much power in mentorship and looking to others who are 15, 20 years ahead of you and trying to understand how they've lived their life and things that they've done to make themselves better, so that they're just not only bettering themselves but those around them and the people they're getting to work with and their communities. All that's kind of a byproduct of it. So I love that. So as we kind of wrap up here, always ask every guest kind of what they are reading or doing, because some people are, especially in your world, you may be doing something that's contributing to your personal growth and development.
Yeah. So I've got a little book list that I've talked to you about, and obviously we talked about range being on there. But actually, right now, I'm doing something a little different. I am there. There's a man named Craig O'Shaughnessy, and Craig it has not only transformed my tactics as far as my coaching, but he has been the first person. Tennis is like way behind as far as like data analytics go. Like in football and baseball and a lot of these other places. Surely you've seen the movie Moneyball. I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyway, in tennis, we're like this old school tradition sport that has just been stuck for so long. And so he has started a program. It's called the Brain Game, and it's a website, and he has daily videos and articles, and I'm part of it. I'm studying through it in his website called the Brain Game. And what's really interesting is in not until and not it wasn't until 2000 it was until 2007 that IBM started to really dive into the analytics and have a massive quantity of data, and he's been mining that data of all the tennis match, the major tennis events, which are the four Grand Slams, which are
Right.
Wimbledon, French Open, U.S. Open, Australian Open, and he has basically almost daily come up with new and kind of fascinating um, the analytics from all this data of the pro tennis players, men's, women's, and now it's even trickled down into beginners, and so it's transformed how I'm coaching on the court. Even the not only the actual the drills and things that I've done, but even in the order and the processes of how it's done, and I it's just been so long since I've gotten so many new nuggets of coaching input and based off real data.
Yeah.
And so when I'm
Yeah.
trying to show young people, especially 18 to 22 year olds, that hey, you know, now 70% of all tennis points are over in the first four shots. Well, tennis, most people that think about tennis player, and I don't know how much but they think, oh, well, yeah, you just keep the ball in play as long as you can. Well, he discovered that tennis is really about the first four shots, and it's over quicker, and you should practice those. And so it's just been a game changer because we've been practicing and coaching so many a different way, and he's shedding light onto that the tennis is totally, it's actually the opposite of what we've been doing for so long.
Yeah.
And so I find that most of my student athletes are very visual learners, and so he does
Yeah.
little short clip videos, and then that obviously helps me, and it's not only transformed how I coach, but actually how I set up practices, and I've actually been studying him since 2017. But this new website just kind of came out recently, and I'm sure it's not. There's a direct correlation between when I've started studying him in 2017 to the successes of the team.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan, to say the least. But
That's cool.
It's a
Kind of
little
like
different.
your business leaders you were talking about. I mean, that's definitely something they probably are doing as far as they're looking at the data, the KPIs, key performance indicators, and
Oh
which
yeah.
is kind of sounds like what you're doing on the tennis on the coaching level. It's a very
Well,
similar.
I'm trying to
So,
maximize my guys, and
yeah.
so if I can maximize my practices and things like that, so it's pretty exciting for me. I literally get excited to see his little blurb that comes out usually around midday, and then pick up some new nuggets. But so that for me right now, I think he's got a couple more things coming out. But I'm all over him.
That's
like
good.
white on rice. Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, I appreciate you joining us. This has been a fun conversation, and I appreciate the work that you do at MTSU and more importantly in our community. I think your reputation preceded you with all the mutual friends that you and I have, and so I'm glad to have you on and get to know you a little bit better, and know our audience will enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.